Welcome to the Path 11 podcast with your hosts, April and Mike. Today, we would like to introduce you to Todd Acamesis. Todd has been exploring consciousness through expanded states of awareness for more than a decade, including 10 years through the out-of-body state of consciousness, and regularly presents talks and seminars on the subject. Through 5 years of running international workshops on out-of-body exploration, he has taught thousands of people how to self-induce out-of-body experiences, which have many benefits, including, among many others, how to be more present in your body. Todd is also a director of an organization that developed a deep trance meditation machine called Pandora Star, a device that facilitates fast, reliable frequency states for deep exploration work, including deep meditation, lucid dreaming, psychic development, out-of-body exploration, brain training, and much more. We're very excited to have Todd on our show today.
You were born in the U.S., is that correct?
Yeah, I grew up in Tampa, Florida, and I stayed in the U.S. till I was 23 years old, which was just sort of coming to the tail end of a hitchhiking journey I did, which was 3 years from age 20 to 23, which I hitchhiked across the lower 48 states, as far up as Canada and Alaska and parts of Mexico and the Caribbean. So then I kind of got the bug to travel and see some of the other part of the world, but didn't get much farther than England, so due to some synchronicities, but I'm really enjoying living here.
Wow, that's amazing.
Did this have any effect on your lucid dreaming, out of body, this traveling? Is that?
I kind of find that the thing that has the biggest effect, I know a lot of people in these circles will talk about, their particular, sort of favorite things to recommend, whether it's diet or, the quality of sleep and other rituals. But I find the thing that serves me best personally is just remaining really consistent with my practice and the quality of my practice. I think, having a real good conviction, a level of belief and knowing goes a lot further than anything else, because I think ultimately if we surround ourselves with too many metaphors, too many belief systems, that can sometimes, those things will be crutches and they can get in the way of, having a very portable practice.
You do a lot of lucid dreaming, you host workshops, you do out-of-body experiences. Now, how did you get all started in this?
For me, it was a really early journey. I would imagine similar to a lot of people who will be listening to this podcast. When I was 6 years old, I started to have very spontaneous experiences, and I think this is a very natural state for us to explore. Unfortunately, it's just a matter of not having the support from a very young age to where it goes beyond parents maybe saying things, typically of, it was just a dream. My mother was a lot more supportive in the sense that I think she, as much as I could detect that the experiences I were having were different from normal dream states. Typical sort of dream, I wouldn't ever see my body. I would always be first person in the experience, whereas in these other experiences, which I now know to be out-of-body experiences, I would see my physical body, or I would see a representation of my body. And that was usually in, a near enough correct orientation within an environment which I would know as my bedroom. And so to me as a child, it started off very early on, and it was definitely, I knew it was something different from my nighttime dreams. I couldn't quite articulate it. I didn't understand it more than what I just explained, but it was a very early start. I had about 6 years from age 6 where my mother would sit me down at the breakfast table, and it was a usual ritual for her to get out a journal and take note on my behalf of the experiences that I was having. And I think her interest and her openness and her encouragement really helped a lot in those early formative years to be able to really develop this into a full-blown skill. She'd have me not just, she wouldn't just transcribe what I would report, but she'd have me draw with crayons and colorful markers, the sort of environments, the people, Yeah, it went on like that for about 6 years.
Do you come from a family that also has experiences like this with your mom being so open? Did she have any prior experience through her journey in life that, made her pay attention a little bit more?
I think she had a keen interest in metaphysics, but beyond that, she never really discussed her own journeys, and whether that was a conscious choice not to get in the way of my stuff. Um, to be honest, I've never really spoken to her about those sort of that early stuff, which would have included any of her own journeying. But with regards to the rest of my family, I've got a really sort of interesting family background. My three brothers, I've got three siblings, and they've all got sort of top security clearances with various government agencies, and so I'm that classic sort of black sheep, if you like, within the family.
Now, you've kept this knowledge of, this lucid dreaming, out of body, up until now, where we've talked to Tom Campbell, who everybody probably listening to this knows who he is as well. Tom had early experiences with dealing with entities that would come visit him at night, but then I think by the time he was 10, 11, 12, he kind of forgot all that and became a teenager, and then didn't rediscover that until later in college when he took a meditation class. So you've continued this knowledge till now. Has it changed? How much has that changed? I guess growing up with that experiences.
Well, change-wise, I'd say it's been a very steady sort of flow. And if you can imagine, this sort of thing wasn't reserved just to my nighttime sort of experience. I had a lot of clairvoyance experiences. I had a lot of sort of telepathic stuff at a young age, and this didn't always go down very well on sort of the school playground, and I kind of was very much mentally bullied. So I was very sort of peripheral with sort of social stuff as a child. I had friends who I felt very safe around, but most of this I discovered from early on needed to be kept to myself. Otherwise, you just you generate a lot of fear. My sort of teenage life was a mixture of enjoying synchronicity and manifestation in ways that it was just again, it was natural. And I think for a lot of us, it just becomes normal not to experience this range of phenomena. But for me, these I guess these windows into these other levels of consciousness remained open, which was good from a young age. And as an adult, I find it has served. It created the basis for who I am at the moment. I teach this stuff, and I really love being very playful with energy. I find the more playful we are, the more fun it becomes. So change-wise, it's been a very steady development in this way for me from childhood to where I'm at now. But I'm always sort of in this sort of zone of constant change, constantly reading and looking at other people's work and wondering and looking for ways to fit that stuff into what I do. To me, it's about constant growth.
And do you want to talk a little bit about some of these workshops and events that you're putting on? And I'm really excited to hear about the Pandora Star, because I've seen some pictures on your Facebook page and I'm thinking, what is that contraption? And I've seen you, I think you set it up in your bathroom somewhere too, right? There's a picture of that. I'm like, what's happening here? What is this thing? It looks so cool. But do you want to delve into a little bit of what you've just kind of been experimenting with and what you do at the workshops and why people come, to hear you speak and teach and all of that fun, playful stuff?
Absolutely. I'm very happy to discuss all of that. And I think a good starting point would be with synchronicity itself. One of the experiences that we have here in London is one where we can have a direct experience. So it's an event where we meet up in central London, where we have a community, online community, where we have about 4,000 members, and at any given moment, people will come out to various events. But the the synchronicity walk that we do in London is probably the one that gets the most interest and fills up. Once I put it online, it only takes about 10 minutes to have a waiting list. So we have about 20 people where we'll meet in central London about maybe in the evening, 7 p.m. in the evening on any particular weeknight. And invariably people will arrive not knowing much of what's going to happen. They'll ask for the plan, and I'll say, well, there is no plan as such. We have dice, so we have dice where we roll the dice and we let the dice decide which direction we're going to go. So we leave this really down to, synchronicity, serendipity, these sort of cosmic phenomena, which I find can really open people up like a cosmic can opener. You can come along to this event, maybe, being very skeptical, and experience back-to-back-to-back synchronicities, and some of them very powerful. As an example, we would usually at the beginning of the walk, we'd roll the dice once just to get a group number. And that group number would serve as like a breadcrumb trail, a way to communicate between these various levels. To me, synchronicity reminds us to really ground ourselves in the moment, and that it's a great sort of reminder that there's a deeper energy to our everyday lives. So on one particular walk, as an example, we rolled the dice at the very beginning to get our group number, and we got the number 4. So the idea is, as we begin to walk and lose all need to control, just let the dice decide which way we go without second guessing, and using our intuition in sort of moments where it becomes apparent. On this occasion, we rolled the number 4 and we set out on our walk. And within about 15 minutes of the walk, we rolled the dice, like I said, at street corners. And we got to this one place next to a central location in London, rolled the dice and got the number 4 again. So we started to look around for the occurrence of number 4, and we noticed we were literally standing right underneath the number 4 bus stop. Now, like in most major cities, you have a bus route dedicated to one particular sort of bus, and we have to just be synchronistically underneath this particular one. And I then said to the group, why don't we get on the bus and see where this goes? And the moment I said that, the number 4 bus came around the corner. So that, again, was really good synchronicity. As we were getting on the bus, it began to rain. So we stayed dry. We were on the bus and now dry, so another occurrence of synchronicity. We get on the bus, and I decided we'll roll the dice to see how many stops we go. So we rolled the number 9, so we went 9 stops. At the end of the 9th stop, as we're getting off the bus, it stopped raining. So again, an occurrence of synchronicity. If we would have rolled a 3 back at the bus stop, we would have never got on the bus. If we got on the bus with rolling a number 4 and rolled a number 8, we would have probably still got a little bit wet. So everything was perfectly timed. When we got off the bus at the 9th stop, there was this poster that somebody had plastered to a brick wall that said, "Wait here for further instructions." It was just absolutely,
Wow.
you just couldn't, pay somebody to try and, formulate something like this. That's the power of this. Again, it's not a matter of suspending your beliefs, but at least being open-minded enough to be able to experience realities within realities. And I think, a good illustration of that, is like a negative hallucination. Sometimes we don't see what's right in front of our eyes because of belief system blindness. And I teach people on these very simple walks, which anybody can recreate anywhere, in the world if they'd like to give this a go. Just grab some dice, just get into a mindset that you're going to allow your intuition to flow. When it does flow, don't second guess it, just follow it. And let go of any need to control or to experience a particular outcome. And you're going to experience, that raw energy of the creative forces of the universe, which are always there. It's just whether or not, our belief systems, our preferences, our moods are allowing us to see which is right before us.
Now, let me ask you this. What would you say is the difference between synchronicity and maybe law of attraction, where the group may be kind of manifesting some of these experiences to happen? Like if they're in that mindset and, they roll the number 4, then people might be looking for the number 4. How can you tell the difference between the things that just naturally unfold as opposed to the anticipation of the energy or thoughts of the group?
Well, to be very honest, April, personally, I don't really see any disconnection between, this phenomena. I don't see how you can have synchronicity without manifestation, and vice versa. It's like any sort of personal development or spiritual practice, whether it's something like astral projection, lucid dreaming, channeling, other psychic development phenomena. We're talking about sort of using methods, different methods to access the same field of consciousness. And we're just using our sort of our preferred access methods, if you like. So to me, if the group holds this mindset, this belief system, this desire to experience synchronicity, then of course manifestation plays its pivotal role within that. So I don't really sort of separate them out. I think it's very interconnected. I mean, this is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with interconnected consciousness.
Right, right. Okay.
Now, the experiences you've had with this rolling the dice, how deep does that go? How far do you take that?
We really let it go as far as it wants to go, and I guess to the level to where the group feels comfortable. To this date, we've so far not gotten arrested, which is a good sign. We do have some boundaries, but just sort of extending from that point where we get off the bus on that one occasion, and we had the sign that said, "Wait here for further instructions." When I get into a really playful zone, I will follow that guidance all the way through. So I asked the group to remain still in that space. And within just seconds after remaining in that sort of that space, we had the driver pull up. The person, their passengers got out, and I went up to the driver and I said, "Look, we're not tourists. We don't want to go anywhere in particular. We're just out having a bit of fun. Sort of inverted quotes. Experience some random phenomena," and I just asked him to sort of randomly choose a direction for us. And he sort of let go, and he just sort of just waved his arm in the air and just pointed in a direction, and we thanked him, and we followed that sort of extension to the breadcrumb trail. And within minutes, we came across this apartment block where there was some very loud party music coming from the penthouse, sort of apartment. And so I said to the group, I said, "I think this is an opportunity for us to, get in to sort of mingle with, playmates." And in London, we've got 8 million, residents in London. So that's 8 million, potential playmates at any given time. Yes, unsuspecting to them, but as long as I think you're in a real playful, creative energy, most people will find a way to connect with you. So I said to them, "Let's see if we can get upstairs and get it, gate crash this party." And the moment I said that, this man comes from a tavern or pub from across the street, and he looks like he's striding with great purpose, and he sees our group, and he's like, "Hey, what are you guys up to?" And we said, "Well, we're going to gate crash this party." He goes, "Oh, that's a coincidence. My mates just bet me I wouldn't go gate crash that party myself." So again, we had this convergence, of time and space for synchronicity. And so, our group plus this and plus one, I think on this occasion there was about, like I said, maybe 20 of us. We went up to the top floor flat, knocked on the door. The owner opened up the door, and he's very surprised to see us. But within less than a minute, he'd invited us into the party. He really liked what we were about. And this type of thing can happen on a regular basis. We can sort of be walking past a building, and maybe there's a door that's ajar, and we'll be sort of courageous enough to trust that it's a sign to explore. On one occasion here in central London, where they have the law courts, there was a big wooden gate which is normally closed at night that lead to this magical sort of private garden area. And again, the gate was ajar, so we went through, and we found flowers that smelled like chocolate. We found this magical playground which is usually reserved for the more sort of elite of society. And it was, completely open to us because we were open to the universe, and therefore we were experiencing this great depth. So personally, I find as long as you remain open and you trust and you have that courage to trust your inner guidance, you're going to go really deep, and I don't think there's a limitation to it. Again, your personal boundaries will play into it, which is why, kiddingly, I did mention, we've so far not gotten arrested, but that potential is always there too. But usually, the group dynamic would steer us away from anything that the group energy is not entirely comfortable with. But I find it usually works out to the level to where a lot of people will walk away from this sort of experience forever changed. I've had people years after, a simple meetup experience like a synchronicity walk who will sort of report back to me, way after the fact by email, and they'll say something to the fact that, I went on the next day, I carried on with the walk in my mind. The synchronicity walk didn't end, and I found synchronicity everywhere. I became more and more open, and my life has changed, because of this. So I think the depth is down to the person, down to the group sort of level, but the universe is deep.
I think that's just hearing about this group walk that you did, that, and I think for a lot of people too that are, we're all kind of in the same position right now where everybody's worried about paying bills. They got to go to work, they work the 8 to 5. They can't deviate from this pattern, or they'll they may lose their job, they may lose their house. But at the same time, you're kind of just letting go and just say, whatever signs show up, we go in that direction. And I don't know if I really have a question, but it's just, I think that's, just thinking about that is a very freeing experience, breaking us from this mold of, that society puts on us, that I don't know.
You're making a very good point here, Mike, which I'd like to pick up on, because one of the components of synchronicity, I find it's got a really grounding energy about it, and to the point to where when you really allow yourself to fully immerse yourself in the energy of this, that inner child starts to come out. And on several occasions, we've been in London, and we've sort of synchronistically wound up in one of the big central London parks. And I can remember one occasion very vividly in my mind where there was probably a good 300 adults sitting in the park, getting some sun after work, socializing. And there was a group of us, maybe about 10 of us on this occasion. And we got into the park, and I said, okay, how about, because we're being very playful, why don't we play some childhood sort of games like red light, green light. We'll play tag, all kinds of things. And we chased each other playing Stuck in the Mud, which is a version of tag here in the UK, where you chase people, and if you catch them, they have to stand still until somebody else who's not one of the chasers can tag them and free them again. And we're playing for a good hour. Not a single one of these 300 plus adults joined in, our games. But I promise you, I can imagine if there were 300 children present there, we would have been swarmed with requests to play. Hell, they wouldn't have even asked. They would have just joined in. So I think you're right. We get to a certain level, I think it's somewhere within teenage years where we're expected to take on a level of responsibility which a lot of us are not prepared for. And quite frankly, that is a failing of society in a sense that, youth is really, in a sense, stolen from us. And even, those younger years, we don't value play. We don't value that inner child. And these sort of experiences really teach people that it can be very grounding, to the point to where I usually ask, after we're a good hour playing these sort of games, and everybody's, now feeling invigorated with all this energy of manifestation, and I ask them, how many of you for the last hour while chasing each other around have been thinking about paying your bills? How many of you have been in your head thinking, oh, I need to get this done, or I had that argument with the boss earlier? Nobody reports any sort of thought of that nature. They're grounded in the moment. This is a very powerful experience for people. Sometimes we're walking past a playground on one of these walks, and I'll ask people before making the suggestion of going onto the playground and going on the swings or going down the slides. I'll ask a group of adults, when is the last time you allowed yourself to sort of just express yourself in a playful way. When's the last time you were on a playground? When's the last time you allowed yourself to sit on a swing and you recreate that experience from childhood? And usually there's not a single hand that goes up. It's just these are things we don't seem to value in society anymore. And we've got this real conflict of values that goes on within us, because I can assure you there are parts of our consciousness that are really feeling uninvolved, or really feeling overwhelmed by all the worry that takes place on a daily basis. You know, April mentioned the law of attraction. You know, for those of us schooled in this sort of area of thought, why is it that we still choose to have this background noise of worry all day long? That is co-creating with this universe. So it's this sort of phenomena that can really bring people back to a balance point, to help them really understand that they've got their own inner community of subpersonalities, and some of them are very overwhelmed with the too much responsibility, being too serious. And sometimes it's a matter of being really present with that inner community, almost having like an open mic night, and allowing these subpersonalities to really speak out and say, look, hey, you need to slow down. Hey, you need to sort of maybe think about, being less serious today, and maybe just putting down, the adult tools, putting down an adult, sort of novel, picking up a childhood sort of favorite book, going out to play, pack yourself a lunch, going on a picnic, just disengaging from that which, too well, which is, our busy lives.
Now, I want to bring up another, let me just use the keyword intention. Is there any other forms of intention involved in this? I know you have the dice, but are you setting an intention before you go out? Yes.
I'm glad you picked up on that. We have two different levels of intent. We have the group intention to experience, of course, synchronicity and the many manifestations that can come from that, which we don't limit. And we do our best not to judge. So, I mean, even if we roll the dice and the dice sends us straight down one particular street, and we get to the next street corner and we roll the dice again and it sends us straight back to where we came from, and we do this 2 or 3 times in one occasion, on one walk, 5 times up and down the same street. But that's like life in itself. How many times do we recover the same ground before we finally get the lesson, before we get the message? But even on a personal level, I ask people to hold an intention, because synchronicity is an amazing medium for communication between different levels of your consciousness, as well as other beings, what we might in spiritual circles call guides or helpers. And they're always there to communicate. Again, reality is within realities, but if we're not open enough, if our mind is too cluttered and not clear, we're going to miss communications that are always there. These messages are always there. It's just a matter of whether or not that signal to noise ratio, like they talk about in science, whether we can tune into the signal and reduce all the noise. So at the beginning of a walk, I will say to people on an individual basis, if you have a question about your life, if there's an area of your personal life where you'd like to get some feedback, where you'd like to get some insights, hold in your mind now, an idea. If you'd like to go, for example, backpacking to Australia, then hold the intention that synchronicity in the most spectacular way is going to show you and give you, feedback. And I think as long as we're open to these feedback loops that exist out there in reality, we will see them, we will experience them. And sometimes we're walking along, and at the beginning of the walk, I'll also suggest to people that we don't just depend on the dice. If you suddenly get a strong intuition that we need to go down, some dark alleyway, hell, there's usually a good 20 of us. Nobody's going to mess with us. We'll go down that alleyway and we'll explore it. So, on one particular night, yes, somebody got a very strong impulse, and we followed it. We went down into the alleyway, and there was this sign which was totally unmistakable for one person in the group that gave them the answer. And this was a separate person to the person the feedback was for. So it also goes to show that if we can learn to trust and hold bigger spaces, we increase the opportunity of that feedback loop system to where other people can help guide us to the insight that we need for our everyday lives. So yes, we do set the intent on a group level as well as on a personal level.
How would somebody sign up for one of these walks, these adventures, I guess?
Well, if they live in London, we have a meetup group where you can become a member. It's free of charge to become a member. These particular walks are also free. So for anybody who's sort of currently stuck in any sort of poverty consciousness, it gives them an avenue to come and play by just investing their time and their energy. And we just ask that people come along, and even if they're skeptical, just to be an open-minded skeptic and bring some humor along as well. We really need to have the humor, because I think when situations start to occur where your belief systems, perhaps of a lifetime, your deep-rooted core beliefs are being challenged by direct experience, you're going to need some humor. So we usually recommend that if people don't have any, to go and get some before they visit, come out for one of these walks, because it's just too important. Not to be able to express in this way and really let your hair down and really enjoy. But yeah, so if people are in London, then they can just visit our meetup group, which, if you're happy for me to give out the web address, is www.meetup.com/Journey of Truth. And from there, you can find some of the other UK-based groups that we have throughout other cities. If you're based in another country, there's many ways you can do it. You can either email me, and I'll give you sort of a guidelines list where people can create their own walks. Or if they're feeling really sort of creative and really bold, then you can invite me, and I'll be happy to come and lead your walk no matter where you are in the world.
I'm thinking of doing that here in New York.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, that's I would totally do something like that. Now, I just want to ask you a question. Do you watch a lot of movies or TV?
I don't watch TV anymore.
Okay.
I do have a Netflix account, so I do sort of watch films. I do go to films still. I usually have these as treats, if you like. I really motivate myself during the week to get done the things that are important to me, the things that I prioritize over films. But once I finish with my priority list, I do take in films, and there are certainly films out there that can certainly be inspirational for this sort of exploration areas, like the film Inception or The Matrix, and some of the more recent films like Jupiter Ascending. There's a lot of great film out there that really Avatar, another one, which can really lead people down the rabbit hole as well.
Yeah, I mean, I brought that up just because I watch a ton of movies throughout the year, and these Journey of Truth walks that you bring up with the meetup, it's kind of like your typical, not a typical, but it's there's some movies that this is a common plot setup where, and I'm going to use Jim Carrey, his movie Yes Man that came out a few years ago. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yeah, I have seen it. Brilliant film.
Yeah, and it's, the typical story where this guy, he's stuck in this rut. He's saying, he's got to take the safe route every time and go with what's familiar. And, but he realizes, halfway through or early on in the film that he's not happy with that. So he kind of, changes it and just says yes to everything and just goes along that path. And I just found that, very nice parallel with, your stories and, your real life stories and how that can pretty much change your life. I don't want to go too much on a tangent of that, but very cool thing. And I didn't think we were going to be talking about that today. But
well, that's the beauty of being really open, Mike. We get to explore, beyond our expectations and maybe find something better than what we were going to originally talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah. I find too, just in hearing these stories and, in my other job that I do, I find that about 85% of the people that I'm working with are really struggling with this illusion of their own control of life and planning. And, just hearing these stories, it's like, yeah, life is supposed to be fun. Why can't it be spontaneous? Why do we have to have these agendas and planning this out? And this is what I'm going to do at this hour, this hour, and this hour. And, and then people worrying about the future and future planning where, I think of some of the key phrases of let go and let God and ask and you shall receive. And, some of those things are kind of, what you explained in those walks. It's just just letting life lead instead of us leading, I guess. That's
For
what it makes
sure.
me think of. Yeah.
And I think you're right, April. I think, structure and organization are necessary and important, but equally so too, is this flow of life, which is always there to connect with. People talk about, getting in the flow, and it might bring confusion to some where they think, well, how do I get into that flow? The flow is always there. It just depends on what flow channel you're in. Are you in a flow channel for misery? If you are, there's plenty of miserable people to synchronize with. You can be miserable together. But it's a matter of just realizing that this energy is everywhere. It permeates every part of this multidimensional reality. And if we are quite happy to sort of find ways to break our current state, then we can get into another state within seconds. And yes, you're right. I think if we do allow this mindset to nurture this mindset, there's perhaps no end to what can be explored. I mean, even to the point I decided, because of my early years in America, where I hitchhiked across America and experienced such amazing synchronicity and manifestation to the point where it was like blatantly exposing itself to me, I decided a couple years ago here in the UK that I would go on a synchronicity hitchhiking trip. And so what I did was I just got my passport, some cash, and decided, when I put up a sign to hitchhike from location to location, I will be very adaptive. I will just get into that flow and allow myself to go anywhere. I've got my passport, so I could potentially wind up in another country if I just trust that inner guidance. So, for example, when I was hitchhiking in America, if I wanted to go from Tampa, Florida to California, I would hold up a sign that would say something like California or heading west, because then, of course, you get a longer lift instead of many smaller lifts, which can be more time consuming. But over here in the UK, when I decided to go on this synchronicity hitchhiking trip, I thought, wait a second, I've got no particular destination in mind, so that kind of sign won't serve me. So what I decided to do was get really creative. On the very first sign that I held up, it actually, only words that were on it were astral planes. Now, I realized that a lot of people driving by wouldn't know what that meant. And that was okay, because I didn't want to just have anybody pick me up and talk about politics or football. I wanted to be able to have some deep, meaningful conversation that could really, change lives. So I held up this sign. I was there on the side of on the highway here, we call them motorways in the UK. And I held up this sign that said astral planes. And this guy pulled over within just a few minutes, rolled down his window. And the position I was in was I was only a few miles from an airport, a major airport called Gatwick Airport. And the guy rolled down his window and he said, "Are you trying to get to Gatwick Airport?" And I was like, "No, wrong planes, dude, wrong kind of planes." And I didn't have time to explain it to him, but my gut feeling said, let this guy go. This isn't my ride. This isn't my lift. So I waved him on. And within just a few minutes after, this young man, maybe 20, 21 years old, picked me up, and we're driving along, and within a few minutes, he made that decision to ask that socially acceptable question, "What do you do for a living?" So I sat there for a few seconds pondering this, because I didn't want to sort of go right for the jugular and talk about things like out-of-body exploration and astral projection. So I decided, we all have that commonality. We all share dreaming in common. So I started off with dreaming, and I let that naturally sort of go into lucid dreaming. And within about 15 minutes together, I'm watching this young lad and watching his sort of body language and the nonverbal communication, and I can see he's really taking this on board. He's really getting it. And then I sort of let go. I stop talking and get into a space of just sort of holding the space, and you can just feel the energy, and you can see it ticking over in his head. And he finally sort of feeds back to me, and he says, "Okay, so let me get this straight." He goes, "I'm a mechanic, and I like to tinker with cars in my spare time. I like to customize cars. Are you saying that I could get into a dream state if I became lucid to a certain level? I could then start to create, whatever I want?" And I said, "Yes, it'll take practice. It may not happen the first, second, third time, but with enough practice, consistency, and conviction, it will happen." Okay, so he went quiet again, and we then came to the point to where it was that fork in the road. I was going to go one way, he was going to go another way. So I pulled the car over, and he actually turned off the ignition of the car. And I thought to myself, oh, this has gone deeper than expected, and he probably has some more to talk about. So I just waited, and there was silence for a few minutes, and then he finally, fed back to me again, and he said, Todd, he said, I've worked at the place I've worked at for the last 2 years, and that's where I've just come from now. He said, in 2 years, I've never, ever asked the boss if I can go home early. And today I did. And I kind of get the feeling that if I wouldn't have asked to go home early, you and I have never met. And I said to him, I could feel it. I knew how powerful of a moment this was. And I said to him, maybe that's the case. Maybe it could also be that I would have been slightly delayed and we would have still met. But regardless, here we are. And he said, he continued on, and he said, I would normally at this time, I would go home, I would put on Xbox, I'd play Xbox until it was time to bed, maybe drink a few beers, and that was my evening. He said, I don't feel like doing that tonight. He said, I feels as if something's really, triggered inside of me. And he was using some very creative languaging to describe what was going on, and it was a beautiful experience. And he finally said, he said, Todd, I've never had a conversation like this. My friends and I wouldn't even know how to have a conversation like this. It was deeply powerful. It was a real meaningful experience for both of us. A reminder to me that, this may be my everyday life, but am I taking it for granted to some level? Am I taking it for granted, that there are so many people out there that, I'm not saying this young lad was in pain, but, for a lot of us, we are looking away from, that deeper side to life, because maybe when it does come up, we don't understand it. And because we don't understand it, maybe it frightens us, and we don't want to look to be too different from everyone else. And so we kind of keep things to ourselves and low key about it, or we don't have these talks. But, when we're in a space where we can hold that space for others, it doesn't mean we have to sort of, like I said, go for the jugular and preach to people, but at least, maybe start with a transparent entry point where we know, where they're at. We know energetically, we know belief system-wise where they're at, and we come in at that level and meet their needs at that level, and then just nurture the conversation in a very playful way and let it evolve based on their comfort levels. And if things have a chance to evolve through humor, through, curiosity, then of course it's an opportunity for people to explore beyond their everyday self-imposed boundaries.
Have you kept in contact with this mechanic?
He did take my card, and I did say to him that if he's ever in London, where we run a lot of our workshops, we're expanded out a lot more now, but we run one sort of weekend workshop on out-of-body exploration. And I did give him my card and say to him, look, if you'd like to really take this deep, if you can really sort of trust yourself, then come along to this event as my non-paying guest and get a front row seat to multidimensional reality. And we briefly discussed that, and I could tell that was a little bit more far out there for him. But I left it in a way to where it PQ'd his interest and his imagination, and I didn't push it any further than that. If I would have pushed it deeper, it would have sort of crossed his boundaries of comfort and into a place of fear, and it wouldn't have been productive for either one of us. So I just sort of left him on the edge of his comfort zone, which is a perfect place for someone to then, through their own initiative, to explore deeper.
And are there certain people that you've studied along the way, or have you just kind of followed this as your own path and it began to unfold? Or are there other out-of-body explorers that you've read about or tried their techniques and then adjusted it for the way in which you teach it for your workshops? Or are you just basing your trainings and how you're interacting with people off of your own life experiences?
I've got some really big inspirations, mentor-wise. When I was hitchhiking, the person that really inspired me was Richard Bach. Richard Bach's books such as Illusions and Jonathan Livingston Seagull. I was immediately able to connect with an individual who I thought, wow, this person's on my wavelength. I'd like to meet this person. And I then, this was back in the early 90s when the internet was not the internet as we currently know it. There was no Amazons or anything of that sort. so no online bookshops where I could find more information on Bach. But it seemed at one point, as I went from city to city in America on my hitchhiking journals, I found all of his books. At the time, I think it was 7 or 8 books, including his very early books. He was all about flight and the imagination that comes from flight. And his early books were sort of based on his Air Force sort of days as a pilot, and he mixes that in with some of his musings. And to some, maybe not as interesting as his later books, like his inspirational bestsellers, such as Jonathan Livingston Seagull. But those early books, even those touched me in a way where I felt, this person is looking at life in a deep and meaningful way. He's not afraid to sort of go deep, and that's what I was looking for. I was looking for sort of companions along this journey who were open-minded enough to look at stuff and not always look away. Just because we see something that we don't understand doesn't mean we always have to look away. I know we do that because it does create some fear, and we say to ourselves, I don't know how to fix this, I don't know what to do. But always looking away is not the inspiration. And I found that Richard Bach was one of these type people where he always looked. Even if it hurt, he looked. And he'd meditate, and he'd find guidance from other levels of his consciousness, from his spirit guides. And I really tuned into that. Later in the journey, I rode classics like Robert Monroe, Journeys Out of the Body. I've touched base with William Buhlman, learned a lot from William, to the point where William Buhlman and I have actually shared, out-of-body journeys on other levels of reality. I remember actually teaching an astral class. I was in the astral planes, and I was consciously there teaching, about this level reality to people who were interested in, sort of taking their own journey of multidimensional reality to a yet deeper level. I felt like a Pied Piper of consciousness. And I'm there teaching this class, and suddenly William Buhlman walks in the room and sits down, and I'm like, oh my God. That, in my head, I was like, that's William Buhlman. That's what I'm teaching on the astral, and that's William Buhlman. And then, I came back to my body, and I was really excited, and I wrote William an email, and he replied pretty much the next day, and he said, yes, Todd, you and I are regularly called upon by the universe, to teach on these other levels, because, we become very, adept at what we do here on this level reality, so therefore we're very useful human beings. We're very useful explorers on these other levels too. And, I really connected with what he was saying, because he's right. And even if somebody is not remembering their dreams or remembering their out-of-body experiences that will happen on a regular basis, they are living a double life. And sometimes we wake up from a night's sleep and suddenly feel, oh, I need to go out and learn Reiki. Or they feel inspired, or they have an epiphany. And this is because they are having experiences on other levels. And so, yes, people like Robert Monroe, William Buhlman, have deeply inspired me to take my journeys deeper. And there's many others across the path. Even people like Anthony Robbins, who you wouldn't associate with this sort of consciousness exploration. But, his sort of ideas about human psychology helps me be a better out-of-body explorer. It helps me have a better in-body experience. So I'll go where there's inspiration, any sort of inspiration being taught, where I can then, take the best from those systems and apply them to the systems that I teach. Human needs psychology is important, because if you're not meeting your own needs, if you're not meeting the needs of the people around you, then it's going to be challenging. You're going to find distractions in your life, and you're not going to be able to have a dedicated practice. If you can understand that we all have core human needs that are either being met in a low quality way or a high quality way, when we understand this stuff, life again gets easier. Life becomes fun. And so I will look for inspiration everywhere, and I'll find ways to connect with it, with the things that I currently do, and expand on those. So it's not just out-of-body exploration sort of circles that I look to. It's not just to teachers within lucid dreaming communities. I look into the wider community, of consciousness exploration, and I find what I can connect with.
Now, let me ask you a question. Some people out there might be saying, what is he talking about? He's teaching on the astral plane, not in real life. And so my question is, one, do you remember teaching? And two, are you teaching human beings on the astral plane during
would it be lucid dreaming or your dream state, or are you teaching other entities, or both?
All very good questions, and very happy to answer them all. I would find that I've had to date probably 1,000 or more conscious out-of-body journeys now, where I self-induce the experience myself. So this is a conscious process from as much as possible end to end. And let me just give you a little bit more background. So from between the age 6 to age 12, I had these experiences naturally. It then got to my teenage years where things started to almost, just close down, and they didn't spontaneously occur anymore. That's when I started discovering other aspects of multidimensional consciousness, such as synchronicity, manifestation, and more. It wasn't until I was age 35 years old, after reading a book by a remote viewer named Joseph McMoneagle, where I rediscovered Robert Monroe, because I read Robert Monroe's book when I was a teenager, his first book, Journeys Out of the Body. And so McMoneagle was talking about the Gateway program that they run at the Institute, at the Monroe Institute in Virginia, in America. And so I inquired about the course, and at the time it was a little bit more expensive than I could afford. But I was sort of directed onto their home study program, which was much more affordable. And it was an 18 CD home study course, which used their HemiSync technology. So I ordered that. I got really super excited at age 35, thinking to myself, wow, the experiences I had as a child was obviously out-of-body experiences. Now I get to verify all that stuff. I can't wait till that material arrives so I can explore. I remember the day it finally arrived in the mail, in the post, and I quickly opened up the box and I read the materials, and I got a little bit frustrated at the very beginning reading the material, because it said, make sure and approach this in a sequential way. So go from CD1 to CD18, don't skip ahead, and be very patient with it. Take about 2 or 3 months. And I'm very impetuous. So I have to learn to sort of ground this impetuous nature more. And so I thought, no way, I'm going to blow through this course in like a week. I'm going to just get into there, because I looked at the sort of contents list, and I found that the last 3 CDs, CD 16, 17, 18, were more dedicated to the out-of-body state of consciousness, the one I wanted to explore. And I thought, all these other CDs are just in the way. So I remember the very first night I was lying on my sofa, and Robert Monroe came on. You have to use headphones for their HemiSync binaural technology. And I hear Robert Monroe's very gravelly, soothing voice in my ears, and he's starting to explain what's going to happen. And this was probably about 10 o'clock at night. And then I remember waking up about 4 o'clock in the morning, freezing, very cold, lying on the sofa in the lounge in my living room, and thinking, what was that? I don't remember anything on the tracks. The technology just knocked me cold, knocked me out straight away. So I thought, if anybody has any insomnia issues, I mean, this is the stuff. This is their fix. So it was over the course of the next few evenings where I pretty much experienced the same thing, where I'd go onto the sofa, I'd put the tracks on, I'd fall asleep very quickly, wouldn't hear much. And so I decided, you know what, I really have to adjust my attitude towards this exploration. And so I decided over the next few months I would take my time with the materials. And I equally decided that I was going to make sure that I was going to approach this as if I was a scientist. I wanted to sort of gather evidence. So I was going to be evidence-based. I wasn't going to be factually based. I wasn't going to be belief system-based. It was just going to be evidence-based. So I would gather evidence until I had enough proof that I was more than my physical body, as Robert Monroe would say. So it went on month by month, and it came to the end of the period of about 3 months where I still had not triggered a conscious out-of-body experience, but I did learn how to meditate better and to hold what they call at the Institute the mind awake, body asleep process. And it took almost another year before I finally triggered my first experience as an adult consciously, and that was with William Buhlman's help as well. About a year into this, I was still very dedicated to using the HemiSync, but I discovered that in that time, it wasn't like a magic bullet in itself, or better still, I was doing what's called a bottom-up sort of practice, where you learn one set of processes and then you don't expand on it. You just stick with that, and you kind of get to a level of coasting, and that's what I was doing. Then William Buhlman came along in the form of his book, Adventures Beyond the Body, and I read that book, devoured that book, to be honest, and realized, wait a second, this is what I need. I need a top-down practice where I'm constantly growing, I'm constantly learning new ideas, constantly adapting, constantly tweaking my system. You know, having a feedback loop system like a dancer who stands in front of a mirror and sees every micro move and then adjusts accordingly to you know, sort of get to the next level. So at this time, it coincided. I remember reading Bowman's book and going off for a walk one day in my local wooded area. So I went into the woods, and I must have come in contact with the wrong sort of plant, or the right sort of plant, as it turned out, like poison ivy, poison oak, whatever it was. Within a few days, I started having this rash occur all over my body. And one night, about 4 o'clock in the morning, I just couldn't sleep from the itching. So I woke up, put some lotion on my body, laid down on the sofa in my living room, and I put on the Hemisync, and I started going through the techniques that I was learning in William's book. And within about an hour of staying very conscious, I must have briefly fell unconscious, and then suddenly had these very powerful full body vibrations. And it was what I now understand to be this sort of in-between state. The vibrations don't necessarily mean I'm going to have an out-of-body experience, but it's certainly the potential is there. I'm in that zone where, you know, sort of transition between physical waking consciousness and this other levels of our consciousness too. So I'm lying there on my sofa, all these vibrations. I had an eye mask on, but I noticed very quickly that I could see through the eye mask. So I was like, wow, something's cool is happening. I'll try one of William's other techniques, which was like what he calls, you know, sort of you choose a target location and you make a command. And so I commanded myself to sit out of my body. And suddenly there was an energy sensation, and I was sitting halfway out of my body. Now, like I said, it took me a year to get to this state. This was a dedicated practice, and you know, it was very consistent. So I was now sitting halfway out of my body. I looked around, and I could see my physical body lying underneath me on the sofa, and it was just absolute euphoria, a sense of freedom. And I stood up away from my body, and the moment I stood up, this white light sort of flooded into the room, and there was this hand, this sort of disembodied hand that sort of reached through the light, and I was like, holy crap, what's that? Nobody in William Bowman, Robert Monroe, nobody's told me about disembodied hands reaching through light on my first OBE. And it really sort of frightened me. And I suddenly wound up back in my body, and I was in full paralysis. I could no longer see, so it was pitch black behind the eye mask again. I knew I was back in my body. And I was just lying there thinking, oh, I don't believe this. For a whole year I've been practicing this. And somebody sticks out their hand and says hello, and I freak out, and I'm back in my body. But I just calmed myself down, and I laid there, and I thought to myself, okay, I now have the blueprint. It's kind of like being on a plane or being in an elevator, and you suddenly feel, you know, after like the turbulence or the drop in the elevator, and you get that quick sensation in your stomach, you know, like that butterfly sensation. I now knew what it felt. I now knew what the vibrations felt like. So I felt I have the blueprint. I can recreate that. So I laid there. And within minutes, I recreated that sensation, and they actually felt more powerful than the first time. So again, I centered myself. I used some of William Bowman's ideas, and I was sitting halfway out of my body again. But this time I was a little bit more trepidation. I was looking around for hands, nothing, no light. So I walked away from my body once again, and almost moments after doing that, the light came back, the hand came back. And I remember then, I remember telling Tom Campbell about this experience, and Tom, you know, in one of his talks said, you know, like Todd's experience, this is like a test. This isn't a test of failure. This is reality saying, you know, are you ready? Are you sure you're ready in this moment? Are you ready to go deeper in this moment? Because we're ready. You know, the universe is always ready. You know, it's capable of working to any speed. So I said, yes, I am ready. And so I put out my hand, and this other hand took mine gently, very gently, and pulled me further away from the energy field of my physical body. And it then sort of let go. It withdrew into the light withdrew into the ethers, I suppose. And I remember standing there and just being in this profound state. You know, even to this day, after 10 years on of this, that first consciously induced experience as an adult, it's still one of my favorite experiences. It's because it was that moment where I knew, you know, it was up to me now. I didn't have to put my belief in science or religion or society at large. I had a tool to direct my sort of experience into the bigger conscious field and gain direct experience. So, you know, it's from this basis I then started building experience levels. I started to understand multidimensional reality, understand myself more. I kept pushing myself more and more and more to never stop growing, to never stop learning. And this has served me well. So yes, now fast forwarding back to your question, there are going to be people out there who are going to have doubt. They're going to think, who is this guy, and does he need me to call the men in the white ambulance for him, and the answer is, what is necessary right now from everybody listening to this is a new level of thought, because like Einstein would suggest, with any problems that we create in our lives, in order to create a solution, we have to come at this with a new level of thinking, a new level of feeling, which leads to a new way of behaving. So if there's anybody out there who suddenly is in that state of doubt, or any fearful state that says, no, this can't be, this isn't reality, you can't go and teach on other levels of reality, that just doesn't happen. What I would say is, take a moment, ask yourself, when did I pick up this belief system? Who taught me this belief? How did I get this programmed into me? Because ultimately that's what it is. It is a programmed belief system which probably isn't even yours. It might have been your mother's, your father's, a teacher, a friend. It could be anybody, but it most likely is not yours. If you can get to a point of just having your mind open enough, once again, which I think is our true nature. I'm not asking people to believe me. I'm asking people to be open-minded enough to where they can approach these ideas with the level of thought and feeling that's necessary to have the direct experience themselves. You can intellectualize this stuff all you want, but until you get to the point of flexing those emotional muscles, those sort of that will lead to the behavioral modification, people won't take the journey. They'll think they've taken the journey just by allowing their belief systems to come out and judge a process or judge an idea. That's not direct experience. That's not experimentation. And this is what myself and teachers like William Bowman, Tom Campbell are asking of people. We're asking people not to suspend their beliefs, but to come at this with a level of openness that's necessary to be able to experience what's already there, realities within realities.
And that was part 1 with our interview with Todd Acamesis. Be sure to tune in next week when we continue our conversation where we left off with Todd about out-of-body experiences.
If you'd like more information about our films or to purchase our DVDs, you can head on over to our website at thepastseries.com. They're also available to purchase on Amazon.com.
Our films are also streaming online at Vimeo.com, GaiamTV.com, and iTunes.
If you have a show suggestion or would like us to interview someone specifically, please feel free to shoot us an email at info@thepastseries.com or send us a tweet at thepastseries.
Please rate and review us in iTunes and subscribe.
We hope you enjoyed the show.